these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
We hold these truths.
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, folks. Another great episode with the best podcast ever. And if you think that, and I know you do because you downloaded this episode, you download all the episodes, but you probably haven't given the show 5 stars yet. And I don't know why. It's so easy. And look, I just like to have more stars. I like to have more ratings. I'm not really sure what it does for me. I can't monetize this dang podcast, so it doesn't really matter. But I like asking you to do it, so just please do it. We got a great guest with us today, John Guydon. John, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So John's an entrepreneur, public speaker, author, also documentarian.
Yeah.
And the reason you're on today is because we met on a flight recently.
That's right.
And that was the last flight I took before I went blind. So that was, yeah, I don't know what you did to me. But it was we had just such an interesting conversation. And I don't remember. I think I remember how it started now. And I was a little confused at the time because I was like, why does this matter? And but you pointed something out, and you pointed out that the stewardess. So I'd been upgraded to first class, and you as well. So we're both sitting together in first class. And I know everybody's like, what? You're not supposed to do anything nice because you're a representative. Yeah, whatever. Anyway. Like I'm so sick of hearing that. And what you noticed was when the stewardess came to us, she took my order first and then yours. And you're like, you know why she did that? And I was like, I don't know. Is it because I'm white and you're black? Like, and you're like, no, it's because and you asked me what my status was. And I said, well, I'm 1K. It's the highest status because I fly so much.
And I'm gold.
And you're gold. And you're like, they're trained to do that. And that led down a whole new discussion. And you actually, and again, I thought I was like, why are you bringing this up right now? I didn't get it. And then you asked me to watch your TED Talk. You've done a TED Talk, and you bring up that same example. So walk us through why that matters. And because is it a silly example, or is it meaningful, and is it representative of something deeper?
Well, it's actually very relevant and meaningful because all these types of things happen, right? And perspective is critical. It's one of the most important things about how you see something, right? Your ability to see it, that's vision, but how you see it, that's perspective, how you're looking at a situation. So in that example, now that had happened to me a couple of years prior, and I had no clue why it happened. And it just so happens I was the only black person in first class. I was the only black person.
You're the only black person there, and you were the last one to get your order taken.
Correct. And so one could go down that path and say, here are the facts. The facts are, I'm the only person in first class. Fact, true. Fact is, I was served last. In fact, they went out of their way to serve the other person because I'm in the aisle, they're in the window. Mm-hmm. So I saw how it worked. And so when bad things happen, what does your brain tell you the reason is for this? And I think as a society, we've gotten away from looking for all the plausible explanations, for asking questions. I asked the question. I had the conversation with the person next to me. He was wondering. And his arms were crossed. He's like, how can you explain this without racism? This is the challenge. There was a white man I was sitting next to, and he said, how can you explain this without racism? You're the only black person here. You got served last. I said, well, let's find out. I didn't know. I had no clue, but I said, let's find out. So then I asked, I said, hey, just curious. Is there a reason? Is there a methodology you guys use to figure out who you serve in what order? They said, well, yes. And they explained that system. And it's like, that's representative of thousands and thousands of things that happen every single day where people may not, and in a lot of cases, if you listen to what's going on in the media, they don't look for other plausible explanations. If it's explainable with skin color, we use skin color. We're defaulting to race. It is a very lazy and dangerous argument.
It is dangerous because it creates real resentment. Because if it is racism, then there's truly nothing you can do about it. So it also disempowers the individual to a great extent. And maybe, I don't know if everybody thinks about it that deeply, but that's fundamentally what's happening. That's where the resentment comes from. Because if it is race, then there's really nothing you can do about it, and you're just screwed forever. But it seems that there's political motivations. I don't know if definitely political motivations, but almost societal motivations to make it about race.
Just think about the payoff, right? So first of all, to your point, there's actually two sides of this going on. So it's what's more damaging than saying, hey, you get a benefit because you're white, saying that you don't because you're black, that is more damaging, right? To convince someone that that's the lens that they should be looking everything through. But you mentioned something talking about is it politically motivated? Is it not politically motivated? It's actually, I think, in a lot of ways, is financially motivated. So you have lots of people that it's kind of like a doctor. Does a doctor make any money if nobody's sick and nobody needs help and nobody ever goes to the doctor? No. It's not that a doctor is wishing people to be sick, but it's just a fact of life. People are sick all the time. So because we've made an industry out of talking about race and fighting for, advocating for things solely based on race, if that gets better, those jobs go away, that opportunity goes away, that wealth goes away.
Well, this diversity and inclusion training, critical race theory training, anti-racism training is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But that's recent. I mean, that's a recent phenomenon, isn't it? And so, but to your point, there is an incentive structurally, culturally that has happened. And I've pointed this out in my previous writings. Like, why on earth would Elizabeth Warren lie about being a Native American? Why would she lie about being fired when she was pregnant? Because victimhood pays, and it does. I mean, to your point, what it might pay in terms of societal hierarchy of status.
Sure,
it might pay financially in terms of this multi-billion-dollar industry. It might pay in forms of interpersonal leverage and argumentation against somebody, and that gets to your TED Talk. I mean, the name of your TED Talk. Well, hold on. It was changed. What was the name of your TED Talk that you wanted?
Yeah.
It to be?
So the submitted title, the intended title was "Why the Race Card Has Expired."
Okay.
And when it was uploaded, I got a notification. Hey, your TED Talk is live. I go to it and it says, everyone has hardships. I'm like, what is this? I thought it was a clerical mistake or something. So I reach out to the organizer. Hey, my title has changed.
Mm-hmm.
She says, well, yeah, they have the right to do that. I said, okay. I'm looking at all the documentation. So typically they'll say, we wordsmithed a little bit because we thought it would be better for this reason or that reason. They do have the legal right to change it, right? That's Ted's right. But there was no correspondence whatsoever. Hey, I understand you want to change the title. I even gave them a list of alternate titles.
Yeah, they still did it.
Right? Because I want, it was the spirit of the talk, right? I wanted people to say, okay, well, what's this guy talking about? And then the whole thing's all played out. Plus I had a game plan, right? Book with the same title and the whole nine. And they just said, hey, your options are, we can take the talk down, or we can leave it as is. That's it.
Yeah. But in any case, so that's annoying. It's kind of like,
Well, it's a lame title. I mean,
It
who
is
wants
lame.
to watch it?
It is lame, and nobody knows what it means. Like it's you'd get a lot more views with your title that
Yes.
you wanted. Too.
Everyone has hardships. Who wants to? I don't want to watch that.
And also, it's a very lazy point to be making. That's not the point you're making.
No.
I mean, I understand how they came to that conclusion, but the sort of lazy wave your hand. Look, everybody goes through something. Yeah, kind of, but
It wasn't in the spirit of the talk.
Yeah, it's not that. I mean, you're talking about leveraging people through race, and so walk us through your talk and the highlights of it. What?
All right. So, look, first and foremost, I encourage everybody to go watch the talk.
Mm-hmm.
If you have young children that are fans of Santa Claus, I would hold off on watching the talk until you screen it first.
Yeah, spoiler alert: Santa Claus is not real, and he says that in the talk. But otherwise, I think it is good for young children to watch. The talk is very PG. I mean,
Oh, yes.
just to be clear, it just also says Santa Claus isn't real.
Well, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to get a bunch of hate messages like, thanks to your talk, my kid, you ruined the magic. For
I
my
had
child.
one more good Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I don't.
Oh well, my wife ruined Christmas for one of our kids, and then I was like, well, great, you can watch the talk now, and so she watched it and loved it. But so basically, it is. If I summed it all up, it's I want to acknowledge that racism is real. But I also want to say that the way we're using it right now, right, playing the race card, and I specifically define playing the race card, so there's no confusion of what I mean when I say playing the race card. Okay. And the definition is when an outcome or a discrepancy is explained solely by the color of your skin, solely by race. That's
without considering other options first, just jumping right to that.
If we walk down the street and you give me the cold shoulder,
it must be because it's of race.
If you give me the cold shoulder, you're a racism. You can't, you're a racist. You can't just be a jerk. You can't just be this and that. That's it. Period.
One example that's often talked about, but again, mostly by white people, like the guy sitting next to you on the plane, right? This is, I don't know if it's mostly, but it's if somebody sees you on the street, they're more likely to cross the street, or they're more likely to get nervous if you're in a 7-Eleven with them, and you're more likely to be discriminated against by either the teller or other customers. And I always wonder, well, doesn't it depend on a number of other factors? Like, because look, the way you're dressed right now, with a sports coat and a collared shirt, I don't think it's possibly true that anybody would feel threatened by that. Now, there might be some who are, again, truly racist people, I guess, who just like can't even be around anybody of a different race. Look, these people exist for sure, but I've actually never met them, but I'm sure they exist. But it depends on how you're dressed. I mean, like, what if you're dressed completely differently? What if you're dressed like, I don't know, a hoodie over your head? I mean, what do you say to that? How do you even talk about that without getting in trouble these days?
Depends. I don't know that you can, but it depends on a multitude of factors. I say this all the time. If I'm walking down a dark alley and I see me walking towards me, I would cross the street. Yeah. And I'm me. Right? It's common sense. If you see a pit bull, it's 120 pounds.
You're a big dude, so maybe that's also why.
Yes, right. There's other factors at play. I am a big dude,
but what if you saw you wearing a suit?
Well, again, it depends.
Yeah.
Where am I? What time is it?
Sure, a lot of factors.
There's so many factors. Like,
right.
Are they smart? I mean,
are you carrying groceries? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like what is?
What position am I in? Do I feel? I mean, I think about that all the time, right?
Yeah.
Just defensible situation. It's like being in crowds or at a restaurant. All these factors play into things, right? I want to sit here. I want to sit there. There's so many factors that go in, and this is what I'm talking about, right? It's like when more than one thing can be true, and typically always is, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of ands, and people aren't thinking about the ands. They're just picking the laziest, the laziest, most obvious thing, saying it, and we're done.
So tell me about the Santa Claus debacle and why kids are going to be mad at you.
So Santa, I mean, look, when I was a kid, I bought into the whole Santa Claus thing, obviously, like most kids. Most kids do.
I was so smart, I didn't.
Right?
No, I did.
Yeah, like for the first now.
Devastating to learn Santa Claus wasn't real. I swear I saw him once.
I have to tell you about the time I played Santa Claus. That was really funny. So I bought into the whole thing, right? The whole narrative. I was a little skeptical because one year I asked my dad, I said, because we didn't have a fireplace. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, we don't have a fireplace, so how does Santa get? He says, oh, no, and it's a slider door, it's a sliding door. That's why we leave it cracked and stuff. And he was talking to him later. He's like, I was just making shit up.
Yeah. Santa figures it out.
Santa figures it out.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, great. Now, fast forward, I have a Christmas, and for me, it was a great Christmas. But I saw a kid that I knew. He told his mom to shut up. That's like, for sure, that's going to put you on the naughty list. If that doesn't put you on the naughty list, what does? Mm-hmm. Super rude to his mom, right? I think he took a little swat at her, told her to shut up at the grocery store. I'm like, he's for sure going to get coal for Christmas. And when January comes around, we come back from break, everybody's talking about the gifts they get. This kid, he got the most gifts out of any kid there. it was overwhelming how many gifts that he got. And I was confused. I'm like, wait a minute, I wanted some of the things that he got. I didn't get it though. So I'm like, what did I do wrong? And I'm thinking about this, and you're young and you think, okay, well, what are the outcomes? So what are the possible things? Well, one is maybe this guy's not real. That's an option. Or maybe he is real. And because I grew up in Southern California and I moved, I was born in Compton, but then I moved to Orange County, and it was majority white neighborhood. So I was the only black kid in my class. Again, so I'm thinking, maybe he doesn't like me because I don't look like the other kids. Maybe he doesn't like me because I'm different. Those are my choices. Either he's not real or he's racist. What else can we come to? And that's where the Santa Claus thing came from.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because Santa Claus, you're right. Because when you think about it, the whole notion of Santa Claus is a pure meritocracy. Based on your standing on the naughty list is the kind of gifts you will get.
It is Martin Luther King's dream, period, right? It's like, it's not based on anything else. It's like nice, naughty, the whole nine. You're good. You ask what you get for, your dreams come true. I'm like, let's go. This is a great system. I'm all in.
That's an interesting story to how you decided and analytically came to the conclusion that Santa Claus does not exist, and it's because there's no way he could be racist.
Well, again, that was it. That was an option still.
Still an option, yeah.
I deferred to my dad.
Oh, okay.
I deferred to my dad. I'm so grateful that he chose to kill the magic as opposed to
how old were you?
Send me down seven. Send me down a path.
That's about right for killing the magic.
You know what I mean? But send me down this path of ridiculousness where I now look at everything through that same lens because it is dangerous. And even myself, there was a point years ago where I was caught in the cycle, and I'm sitting there, man, this is, and it would literally drive you crazy.
And so, how'd you get to Houston?
Super random. Literally traveling for business. I've traveled here several times. I've got some old teammates that live here in the area, but we travel here for business.
Okay, so you played football.
I did.
For
University of Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, the Buffs. Go Buffs.
Yeah.
And so I would travel here, and whenever I traveled here, I felt at home. The Southern hospitality, when I experienced that, I knew. I was like, that's me. That's who I am, period. So I went home, and we were in Colorado at the time, and I told my wife, I said, hey, I think we should live in Houston.
Yeah.
And she laughed. And then we looked at housing prices, and she laughed a lot less.
Yeah.
And then we started doing some research, and we said, okay, let's take a trip. And we took a trip, and that was it.
Yeah, Texas is the place to be. Well, okay, since we brought up football, though, can we hit another sticky subject on?
Let's hit all the sticky subjects.
On kneeling for the anthem. And look, my take on this is, well, obviously I don't like it. I don't like kneeling for the anthem. But I think it needs to be unpacked a little bit further than that. And I think if you think about the main problem with it, because on the conservative side of the aisle, we sometimes jump to, I think, the wrong points. And the wrong points in this case is that it's disrespecting our military and our veterans, people who've died for the flag. And I'm like, I don't see that, to be honest.
Well, it gets sticky because a military, allegedly somebody in the military is the one who made the recommendation that he do that.
That is true. Yeah, with Kaepernick, that is true. Now, I don't know where that military guy was coming from on that. That was, I think, a stupid suggestion to give to Kaepernick, but that is true. And so intent matters. And intent matters when assessing anybody's behavior, I think, and actions. But the thing is Kaepernick in particular has contradicted himself many times on why he's doing it. Because he has in some ways said, look, well, he's never said he wants to disrespect the military, so it's a bad point to make from our side. But he has said he basically is doing it to disrespect it, to gain attention. My thing about it is you're completely distracting from the issue that you say you care about. And you're also setting no standards in place. So, if you can't answer the simple question, at what point would you stand? At what point is this flag worthy of your respect? At what point is it worthy of your respect? If you can't answer that, then you're not really making a point. You're making a point with no end in sight. And that's frustrating. And nobody's talking about the issue you supposedly care about. They're all talking about this debate about whether you respect the flag or not. And this notion that kneeling is more respectful to the flag has always been the most absurd thing I've ever heard. It's deliberate. It's intended to make a spectacle so that you pay attention to what they have to say. Anyway, that's
what I hate about that is, what I hate about this whole thing is sports is supposed to be sports. That is one of those things where it doesn't matter what you believe, what your religious background is, what your political beliefs are. You come together and you rally around your team. They rally around their team. It's all in good fun. And sports is sports. It's the place that you go.
Outlet for that tribal warfare that humans need really, really badly, because we still have the same brains as the people who cheered as they watched gladiators get ripped apart by lions. Same brain. Okay. Yeah. So we've created rules and we've created different stadiums, and then we watch you guys just pummel the hell out of each other, and it's awesome. And everyone's like, yeah, go.
Right.
We need it.
So
we need to share it.
Right. And we need not ruin that. And so I think that's I have the right to do this. And it's like, well, if you worked at a company selling copiers, and instead of being on the phone selling copiers or during the all hands meeting, if you decided to stand up for the Venezuelan earthworms and that was your cause, right? What would your boss say to you? Would your boss say like, no, it's good. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody do that. Let's get some signs in here for the earthworms and all this. Like, no, I have a responsibility. I mean, I'm making a lot of phone calls. I can spread that word. It's like, are we paying you to talk about Venezuelan earthworms, or are we paying you to sell copiers?
And it just gets lost in the mix. And it's dangerous for our culture when we can't share the things we always shared, and we've politicized everything. It's
common ground is very important.
Yeah,
it is extremely important. If you have no common ground, then this is just theater, right? Even so, just talking about pure politics, right? It's like, do you think that politicians on the right and left have absolutely nothing in common? Are we really? Is that really the narrative that we're selling? That there's nothing that they agree on. There's nothing that can be.
And it's often it is very little things, very few things, but it's usually at least, hey, we like celebrating the 4th of July. We like standing for our anthem. We like watching sports teams. We like laughing at the same movies. That's where it came together, is that common culture. And it is the left. It's not the right. The left deliberately marched through those institutions and politicized them on purpose to weaponize them for political motives. And I don't think they care about the damage it does to the general psyche of the public. It's very frustrating. Because, we are very far apart. Look, we just we were doing committee markup this week, and Republicans are just sick of doing it virtually. We're just absolutely sick of it. And Democrats are like, no, we need to. It is just not safe enough. And this tells me that, oh my God, like when would it possibly be safe enough? You're all vaccinated. Okay. Even if you weren't, like the pandemic it's such low numbers. And the way we treat it now, it's basically a variant of the flu. There is no scientific basis for this fear that you're peddling here. And yet we can't meet in person to do the country's work on important it's really hard to do this stuff when you really need to have that back and forth.
Yes.
It's hard to do it. It's hard to even get what we're talking about over these Zoom calls. And they're just like, no, we just can't. And it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? It's really, so, and why is that risk assessment based purely on political lines? And I guess the point I'm making, and as it's related to what we're talking about, is that every cultural question has become politicized. There is no obvious reason why the risk assessment with respect to the pandemic should fall on left or right political divides.
It's weird.
But it has, really exclusively, and I've done a lot of analysis on this to explain the psychology of it. I won't get into it right now. But it's just odd. Okay, back to you though. Okay, so in your TED Talk, you have a series of steps, and it's basically analytical steps on how to think through these issues. So what are those?
All right. So whenever something happens, right? Something happens, bad happens, even good happens. Some sort of discrepancy, right? We're talking about a discrepancy, and this was originally geared towards. Really just geared towards black people, but I've had thousands of messages from women and other groups to say, hey, this works universally. So it's kind of exciting. Yeah. So step one is to remove race from the equation. So whatever happened, right? So it could be, whatever same thing with getting served food in first class on the plane, right? It's like, which is funny that same thing happened the same thing happened that I talked about. But anyways,
Yeah.
so
That
let's
was a
just,
lot. You need to get your standard, your
I need to get my
status
status up.
Yeah.
I got to get my status up. So let's take that example, innocent enough example. I get served last in first class, being the only black person. All facts. First thing would be is to remove race from that sentence, from that statement. Okay, that's the first thing. So you remove race. Then you replace it with data. So step 2 is add data. And you're looking for any plausible explanation, any and all plausible explanations, period. Maybe, so let's talk about the first class plane situation. Maybe the person serving wasn't properly trained. Maybe the person serving, maybe there's some sort of system in place that's, this and that and the other. Maybe they weren't paying attention. Maybe they are racist. Like, who knows, right? But you're looking for all these different plausible explanations. And so step 2, you make this huge list of all the plausible explanations. Then if you exhaust that and you still can't find any other reason, maybe it's possible you might be dealing with racism. But regardless, you move to step 3, which is ask the question, what can I do to improve my results, right? Or improve my outcomes? What can I do to improve my results? And then step 4 is take action. Mm-hmm. To me, and to lots of others that I've taught this to, it's one of the most empowering mindsets and strategies that you can bring to any situation.
Yeah. And it gets back to this notion of empowerment and disempowerment. If the fact is that it is racism and you don't even think about these other options, you don't look at the data, you don't do step 1 or step 2, you can't control that. And you lose control over your destiny very rapidly. If indeed the number one reason that this outcome, this disparity is different, then you're screwed. And however, if you acknowledge what is almost always true, I would imagine, almost always true, is that there's a variety of factors there. Well, guess what? You just got power back because now you can control these factors. But since you talk about this a lot, you receive a lot of feedback on something like this. And how often is it really just racism? And like when people say I've experienced racism in my life, I take them at their word. But you might be more skeptical. So what's
it's natural to be, right? Because is there a poll that's out there right now where people are going to honestly answer about all their different biases and things that they have in their head? Of course not. So we're chasing a ghost. It's this thing that you can never prove. It can never definitively be proven unless somebody says, you know what, you're right. This is the case. Right. So what we're doing is we're discounting regular stuff. Like, I just don't like you. Or, hey, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Maybe he's a jerk, right? And it's discounting so many things.
It's like the networking example in my talk. So this is the famous stat about breath mints, the connection between breath mints and racism. Mm-hmm. So we're at a networking event and, business people meeting each other and things like that. And it was me and there was one other brother in the whole place, right? And he comes up to me and I say, hey, what's going on? And he goes, don't even waste your time, man. These white people ain't treating us right. I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, man, you could tell like a little bit of his anger, but it was also hurt. You could hear it and feel it and see it. And he said, they're having a good time. They're talking and everything. And as soon as I go up and try to get into the conversation, as soon as I start talking, all of a sudden they have to check an email or go to the bathroom and stuff. And every group I'm going to, I can see the same thing. And he goes, I'm not stupid. I know what's going on. And so the minute he started talking, I knew exactly what the issue was. Super awkward. But I figured I'm the only one in this room that can tell him this. So I say, hey, listen, it's not because you're black. It's because of your breath. It's crazy. Like, your breath is offensively bad. You know what I mean?
Offensively.
It is bad. I mean, if you ever walk up to somebody literally and their breath is...
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to...
It's difficult to focus.
Yeah, it is.
You can't focus. You don't want to be around. I don't want to... I'm telling you right now, I have a bias against if you have horrible breath, and it's unfortunate. Maybe it's not your fault. Maybe you have halitosis or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Your breath stinks. I don't want to be around. So anyway, so I told him this, and I had some breath mints, and I gave it to him. And he said, "Thanks, man. Appreciate you. This and that and the other." And I watched. His day got better. His networking got better because the groups he went to, all of a sudden, it wasn't offensive. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just this repulsive situation.
Yeah.
And so then I made a joke in the talk. I said, well, maybe I won't even I'll let him watch it. But there was a statistic in there now, right? Mm-hmm. I'll just say it.
Yeah.
Breath mints reduce racism by up to 87%.
Yeah.
Or 83%, right? It's like
how else do you give us some more examples? Before we started recording, you because you do entrepreneurial coaching, and you had some interesting examples there too. So walk us through that story that you were talking about.
Oh, you mean the founders and funding?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, other plausible explanations. That's the theme here. So folks, when you hear the story, you get caught up in the other things. But let's talk about other plausible explanations. So I was coaching some founders, and there was this particular case. It was a room full of founders, but it was 3 black CEOs, 3 black founders, all 3 different companies, and I try to create an environment where we can have candid conversations and we keep it real in the room. And it's like, look, don't mess with me unless you want to be great, right? They know my intentions, and so we have that relationship. We can have really candid conversations, which is the way things should be. You should have those types of situations, right? No surface level stuff. Let's just get right to it. So we're talking about funding, and I'd raised millions of dollars in my career, and so I know how the game works, and I've been through it, and I'm black. So the statistics, though, will tell you that pretty much I shouldn't get the funding because, if you look at the numbers, it's exceedingly difficult for, at least one of the narratives is it's exceedingly difficult for black people to get funding, right?
Mm-hmm. And in the aggregate, somebody can find stats that would indicate that's true.
Oh, yes.
Same with health.
Oh,
because
yes.
we talked a little bit about
We can
health.
talk about that, too.
Same with loans.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're talking about. But yeah.
So they said, well, for us, it's even harder because black women, so they were going on the stats.
Right.
Black women have even a tougher time getting funding in
and
these
so the
situations.
automatic assumption, and this is, I think, where the cognitive dissonance comes in. The automatic assumption is that because in the aggregate I can prove this, it's true, it therefore means I, as an individual, will have a harder time.
It's like if I said having a half a tank of gas increases your chances of getting into a car wreck. Mm-hmm. You're like, that sounds silly. But hold on, let's look at the aggregate data. And again, this is all this right here is fake data. I'm just using an example. Mm-hmm. But it's like, all right, we took a poll of all the car crashes and we looked at the gas tank, and and 98% of them the gas tank was half full.
Yeah.
And so
there's a correlation, but it's causation is not obvious here. So you got to unpack the data a lot more to infer causation.
Exactly. So back to the 3 black female CEOs. So they're basically saying, look, it's getting funding for us is very difficult. We can't get it. I said, okay. I said, can we be real in the room? He said, of course. I said, okay. You're not getting funding because you have no technical co-founder. You're not getting funding because you have no traction yet. And you're not getting funding because you're not very coachable. I said, these have nothing to do with discrimination.
Yeah.
And I said, look, we can have that conversation at a later date, but right now let's focus on being good enough for discrimination.
Yeah. Make sure all the other boxes are checked.
100%.
Performance and metrics. And if all else fails, look, it's a possibility. I mean, it can't. I won't discount the possibility. And I guess in your experience, that's my original question. In your experience, have you ever not been able to explain something? And have you really encountered, real racism? Because a lot of people in America that think that and want to believe that. And again, frankly, if somebody tells me that they do it, I want to take them at their word for it.
I have encountered real racism.
Yeah,
absolutely. I will tell you that it did not, it definitely did not stop me from living my life afterwards. But absolutely, I did.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, it's definitely out there. And in the question and I think maybe from a policy perspective, from the cultural perspective, is how do you root that out? Maybe it would seem to me
you can't. What's that?
Yeah. You can't
define that.
Yeah.
Well, it's like how do you root out bad attitudes?
Yeah. Good luck. It's inherent. Some people are just like that, and there's no amount of policy that will change that fact. And so, and I think knowing that, what I see oftentimes is the conversation about, well, it's systemic, it's institutionalized. And I say, how? Like you need to point me to the institution, you need to point me to the rules that are in place, perhaps, that are causing this. And of course they can't. Now what people will defer to is, well, we used to have them. And so there's a legacy here that then needs to be rooted out. And it's like, well, how do you root it out? We've equalized things, when they're like, and then you get to the Ibram X. Kendi notion of antiracism, which is you need modern discrimination in order to alleviate past discrimination, and you need future discrimination in order to alleviate modern discrimination, which he has yet to define. So you're ghost hunting,
right? Because there's no what's the actual because people say, oh, that's the actual definition of racism. It's the definition of racism. It's like, hold on, like let's literally break this down to its parts. And this is why in my talk I specifically I gave a definition for playing the race card, because I didn't want anybody to say, well, he's saying this and what I mean by the race card is this. No, you can't do that. I gave you a very specific definition. And so whenever somebody gave me flack or gave me an issue or started talking crazy online, and I stopped responding to a lot of them, right? But it was kind of interesting to kind of ask, hey, what specifically in the talk did you disagree with? Mm-hmm. What specific point did I make? What specific thing did I say? Haven't gotten a straight answer yet. It's all generalities and feelings.
Yeah.
And I understand those, and feelings are real. I get it. Feelings are real, right? But it's like, facts don't care about your feelings, but feelings don't care about your facts. Well, we're at an impasse.
Yeah.
You know?
And these conclusions cannot be derived solely from these feelings.
It's dangerous. It's very dangerous for our society to play the race card, because it is such a superficial and a lazy argument. And I'll debate anyone, any day, any time about how lazy and how dangerous that playing the race card is. Because if it's the only plausible outcome that you came up with, what you're doing is a couple of things. One is you're convincing everybody who's listening to you, if they're black, that they're less than, that they're a victim. Mm-hmm. That is a very damaging mindset, more damaging than what anybody can do to you externally. Internally, the way that you feel about you is more important than how somebody else feels about you. That's number one. And number two, you're inviting. When you say, if I say, hey man, you're racist because you gave me the cold shoulder, it's like, no, I gave you the cold shoulder because you did this, or I gave you the cold shoulder because, or whatever, or maybe you're having a bad day. I'm inviting you to break that whole thing down and give me all these other reasons, and then where are we going to get at that point? It's combative.
The other thing that drives me nuts about this is it's very selective. Like that, when looking for the disparities in outcomes, it's very selective, because there's a million other stats that I could point out, like the number of men who are suicidal versus women, men versus women when it comes to incarceration rates. So is the justice system discriminatory against men, or are men just more violent? You know, right. It's now, of course, since that's not really an issue and nobody cares about men and, versus women as far as hierarchies go, nobody makes that point. But if we're going to use the logic
exactly
and apply it uniformly, then you have to come to that same crazy conclusion. And
that's why it's so dangerous. Right?
It's a pathology, really, and it feels recent. I mean, does it feel recent to you? Did it feel like the 90s were better with respect to this conversation? What are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting question.
I know we were both the same age, and we were kind of growing up in the 90s. And I grew up in Houston, very diverse communities, and things just didn't feel like they were in your face.
So yeah, when it comes to, I'll answer it this way. When it comes to my life and my community, the people that I spend my time with, it hasn't changed, because of the people that I surround myself with, or we don't deal with that nonsense. But I think that from a mainstream media perspective, 100% it's changed. There are literal interviews and examples of people in the media that years ago had the same exact argument that some of us have today.
Oh, like Don Lemon.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
He's got some switches
Easily,
too.
Right? And so it's damaging. It's one of those, it's what I call the cobra effect. It is.
Tell us about the cobra effect, something you talk about as well. And were you writing a book on the cobra effect?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Yeah, it's coming out soon. I'm not sure when this podcast will be released, but It'll be out. It'll be out this year. So the cobra effect. In New Delhi, India, years ago, there was an infestation of cobras. And the government, in their infinite wisdom, said, hey, citizens of New Delhi, you bring us dead cobras, we'll pay you. Kind of like collecting cans or whatever, just more dangerous. So, all right, I'll put you on the spot, play the game. What do you think happened as a result of that policy?
Well, I kind of already know the answer. So, but I'll play the game. So what would happen if this is the first time I'm hearing this story? Well, I'm sure people started hunting cobras and killing cobras, right? This is what the government wanted. But you might also have an incentive to reproduce cobras and then kill them and then turn them in.
So that's exactly
you
what
created
happened.
a business.
That's exactly what happened. So they started breeding cobras. And so they started breeding cobras. A couple years later, the government's looking at their numbers and they're like, wait a minute.
This is a lot of
going
cobras.
up and not down.
We have the greatest cobra breeding
they were
industry in the world now.
They were catching more and more and more cobras. It was doing the exact opposite that they thought it was going to do. And so they killed the program. And
it's a good program for like cans and water bottles and things like that. Not a good program for deadly animals.
Exactly. So then when they killed the program, they released the cobras back into the wild. And net, you had more cobras after the program than you did before. And that's what's known as the cobra effect.
Yeah.
So we can take that same thing and we can apply it to all sorts of stuff. I mean, something as seemingly innocent as feeding the ducks in the park, feeding the ducks some bread.
Yep.
Most people have taken some bread, feed the ducks. It's kind of fun. It's good for, it's cool for the kids. But if you break down, okay, the intention evil for people to feed the ducks? I doubt it.
Right.
I think it's a pretty just a pure intention to feed the ducks. Ducks like to eat. I've got some bread. They like the bread. Done. That's the intention. But the outcome is much, much different. So what happens when you feed the ducks is, one, there's a muscle that the ducks have. Ducks are hunters. There's a muscle that the ducks have that atrophies because they don't use it. Yeah. So that atrophies, and then they lose their ability to hunt. Two, they reproduce more. So they have more ducklings. Three, they start to infight with each other. So a lot of violence within the ducks, right? They're fighting each other over this bread and over this food. And then over time, they become fully dependent on said bread.
It's amazing how everybody grows up with this. Maybe it's not taught to them, though. Maybe nobody unpack. This would make a great children's book. Unpack the story of why we don't feed the ducks and then apply that to the naive compassion that the left often engages in with respect to policy making, ignoring these unintended consequences.
That is a fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea. My wife wrote a children's book. I'm gonna give her the idea.
Oh, that was my idea. All right, you can have it.
Write it. Write it. The market can handle 2 Don't Feed the Duck books.
That's true. It's just I might use it more often, frankly. Because it's a great analogy.
Well, it's one of those neutral analogies, right?
Everybody knows it too. Like, oh, it does. I do feel sorry for the ducks. Well, it's like you talk about that with respect to the homelessness problem. It's like, yeah, is it good to keep them dependent?
Yeah.
We'll ease into that.
Well, you got to ease into the cobra effect, right? That's why you start with the cobra example, because it was in the past and it's super interesting, and it's most people have never heard that and they're like, whoa, I didn't expect that. Unless you grew up really poor. The people that grew up really poor that I talked to and I quizzed them,
they're like,
they get it.
Yeah, boom,
they get it.
Making money.
Or violence. Like I was talking to Anthony Anderson on a project, a project that we were working on, and I talked about the cobra effect, and I quizzed him, and he was like, "Oh, we're gonna start killing people because if you got the cobras, I'm gonna kill you. Take your cobras." I'm like, okay. You're from Compton.
Took it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, it should have been obvious from the beginning, to be honest. But it's a great example. Okay, tell us about the documentary. You've already done it or you're working on it?
Well, depending on who you ask, the answer is both. The curse of a documentary is, it's not done until you say it's done, right?
Okay.
So, but for about 3 years.
The Dark Dollar.
The Dark Dollar.
Okay.
The Dark Dollar, yes. It's funny, people rename it the Black Dollar often.
Okay.
Pretty funny. Just an interesting tidbit.
People like to change your titles.
Yes. So, so the Dark Dollar. So we spent a few years traveling the country and talking to all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life and different things. And the real question was, what's the biggest problem facing Black America? But the real underpinnings was this intersection between race and wealth in America. So because of the Santa Claus thing, right? Because of the Santa Claus thing, I said, okay, the facts supported two different narratives. One narrative, I could tell the story and people would be like, yes, Santa Claus is racist. Mm-hmm. Like you could come to that conclusion. Like I'll give the benefit of the doubt that you could come to that conclusion if you went there. Or there's another one where you're like, okay, Santa Claus is not real, right? This is true with a lot of stats. So one example would be, and I forget the exact statistic, but people will always tell me, hey, they're pointing at me. They're saying, hey, you have an X% higher chance of going to prison. I'm like, why? Why? They said, well, because you're Black. I said, well, wait a minute. I live in a pretty...
It's not like it's a lottery.
Right.
What the hell?
So dealing with this, right? So this is one of those things that are unchallenged things, right? So Thomas Sowell does a really good job. He does a really good job of this, right? He sends for the data. It's there, but people just don't seek it out. So I actually hired a researcher and I said, I need you to find data. And I'm looking for a specific set of data. I want you to find the financial data behind all racial statistics. Mm-hmm. And so it's fascinating. You can damn near connect any racial disparity to financial, and then but that gets on a whole deep thing. But so let's talk about incarceration for a second. All right, John, you've got a higher chance of going to prison because you're Black. I'm like, me? Why me? Like, why? I live in a nice neighborhood, cool. I've been pulled over 3 times in the last 3 years. I deserve 3 tickets. I have 0 tickets. Pretty big and Black, right? So I'm like, anecdotally, I don't get it. So I sent for the data. And I discovered a couple of very interesting statistics. Number one was something that they call pre-incarceration income. When you hear it, you're like, okay, I get it. It makes sense. How much money you made before you went to prison. The difference between white men and Black men, let's just leave women out because they barely go to prison. White men and Black men, the difference in pre-incarceration income is $400 a year. It's virtually identical.
Okay.
19.2, 19.6. That's it. That's the statistic, right? A much stronger indicator, much more reasonable indicator as to your chances of going to prison. Somebody who earns, a 10th or a 20th of somebody in the upper middle class has a higher chance of going to prison. Okay, so that's one stat. The second statistic is one that really hits home. It's 90% of all men, not Black men, not white men, all incarcerated men, 90% have one thing in common: no father figure.
Yeah, fatherless homes.
So that makes sense to me. That is, so talking about the system, remove race, add data, right? This is adding more data. It's like, that's the example. It's adding data. We're adding pre-incarceration income. Got it. We're adding fatherlessness. Got it. Those things are things that make sense. That's more content of character stuff, more whatever, as less than what you look like. Yeah. Really weird. Which the argument falls down on its face, and we know this, and we know it does. We know it does. Another thing I talked about in my TED Talk is Timmy. The difference between me growing up and Timmy growing up. Mm-hmm. And I said, Timmy has this suburban setup. I mean, he had a 2-story home. I mean, I lived in an apartment with no, I got no fireplace, right? Whatever, right? Not a sob story, right? We're fine. But he's got this 2-story home. I've had dinners at his house. They sit down, family dinners, talk about the world events. The kids all went to Ivy League school, kind of thing. One MIT. I mean, where'd the scrub go? I think the scrub went to UCLA and is a doctor. I mean, that's literally kind of their whole situation. And so when you tell the story, you're like, okay, Timmy, talking about Timmy and everything. It's like, what's the difference between me and Timmy? Well, depending on who you are, what your ideologies are, you might immediately go to race. Say, well, Timmy's got white privilege, Timmy this, but there's only one problem with that. Timmy's Black, right? It's Timmy Tope, right? More specifically, and this is why we need to get we need to dig deeper than just skin color, because yes, Timmy Tope and I are both Black, but I'm American Black, right? I'm a Black American. Timmy Tope, his parents were born in Nigeria. They're part of the Yoruba tribe, and he was born in the United States, but his family structure, his culture is much different. We go to his house, we take our shoes off, we bow, all these other things. I mean, literally, I got my report card. It was a 3.3 or something like that. My dad said, good job, great, good job. Saying good, it's real good, I'm proud of you, yeah. Barbecue that weekend, well, we're all good. I was questioned at Timitope's house about my grades, and he's asking me what my problem was, why my grades were so low. Mm-hmm. And then he would have beaten me if I brought that home to him.
Standards.
So how do you go from a barbecue to a beating? Different perspective.
Yeah.
We're both black, but they have this saying in their culture. It's Ishe Neogun Ishe, which stands for hard work is the antidote to poverty. Mm-hmm. That's what's ingrained into them. And so living in the same system, the same American system, call it what you want. Oh, that's systemic. Okay. If it's systemic, let's go with that for a second. Let's say that it is systemic. Like right now, solely, we're playing the race card here, solely based on your skin color, you have it exponentially harder solely based on that. Okay. If that's the case, you will have to explain to me why West Indian blacks, Ghanaian blacks, Nigerian blacks, and if we're talking about people of color, which statement bugs the crap out of me, but and then there's a few of the Asian communities. I think whites are fifth, maybe in family income and household income.
Yeah.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
In a white supremacist system, mm-hmm. You're fifth. If I was white, I'd be going to the white privilege, council, like, yo, I need my money back. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's just bullshit.
This is I would be so pissed. Like, how are we fifth? You know what I mean? How do these folks come here and that we're doing this? So you'll have to explain to me why the outcomes are different in different communities based on same skin color.
And how do they start too? It's not as if they come here with a bunch of money in the bank and and have that kind of privilege.
Right. I will say that the privilege they would have, and you can call it a privilege, is their mindset.
Yeah.
So they may come with nothing, but that mindset. I mean, Timitope's father drove an ice cream truck, ended up being a chemist for Boeing. Mm-hmm. Right. Mom, works in the healthcare industry. Like they're just
they're just hungry.
Yeah. Why didn't we get a house at that time? Like why? And so and here's the crazy part. So you look at that, and they got a 2-story house, and kind of must be nice kind of situation. Well, my parents, my mom, her parents, they paid their house off in 1980, paid it off.
Yeah. So what do we do about it though? Because I mean, I think we've done a good job for this episode, kind of debunking a lot of the false notions, but it doesn't change the fact that in the aggregate there are problems and that are worth solving within the black community. That we would all have the same goal of trying to get to a place where those outcome disparities aren't so obvious. And then the question is how. Now, we've identified some pretty obvious sources of the problems, fatherless homes, for instance. That's a really hard problem to solve. There's no government policy that just forces the fathers back into the homes and forces them to be good people. There's perhaps incentives that we could rearrange, but that's just around the edges when it comes to government incentives. There's deeper cultural issues. In the podcast a couple of weeks ago, we had Dr. Johnson on, from here in Houston, the 5th Ward, and grew up with these issues. His big thing is if you're going to focus on one solution, it's got to be education, and it's got to be education in in Texas we call it CTE, career and technical education.
Yes. So
you agree?
Oh, this is,
and he says that solves the fatherless home thing too, because now that father, instead of going to jail, doesn't have a college degree, should never even bother with college, but at least has a job.
A man without a purpose, a man without a sense of self-worth is a dangerous man.
Yeah.
That is always the case. And so the disservice we've done to society as a whole is we've positioned college as higher education, and we've positioned the trades as alternative education. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've created this stigma. Sometimes,
so if there's systemic racism in this country, it might be the system of pushing people to 4-year degrees.
Yeah, it's a notion that your only chance to be successful in this country is to go to college. That's absurd. Right. I am not saying that. I'm not saying college is bad or anything like that. But there are trades you can go. You can go out and be a master plumber, and you'll make more than the vast majority of college degrees in this country today, right now, today.
And not only is it not the only way to succeed, it's an unlikely way to succeed. There's a lot of rich white people who got their feel-good liberal arts major and can't make any money or get hired. I would never hire them.
Right.
You know, it depends on their major. It depends on how they present themselves, but it isn't even what we look at. And people need to know that. It's when we look at resumes, I mean, your school might matter to even working in a congressional office, but really we're looking for experience and what skills you bring to the table. And there really has to be a paradigm shift towards that.
I know too many entrepreneurs to be fooled. I know too many black entrepreneurs to be fooled that black people, saying it, an entire group of people like that is just ridiculous, right? But to say black people are incapable of doing these things, it's not the case. Mm-hmm. It's not the case. I think the biggest thing is the really question to ask is what do you believe you can accomplish? Because if your perspective is this big and these are your only options, you're not even looking at these other things that you can do. What a beautiful time to be where you don't have to go to college and have a degree at some fancy school to make six figures. Or to at least be in the top 10, 15% of income earners in the United States. You don't have to go to college. Mm-hmm. You can be a plumber, you can be an electrician, you can be a welder, you can do all of these different things. What an amazing thing that there's that variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go learn AI and you can go learn to code and you can go do that. You can be an entrepreneur, you can go work for a big corporation and work your way up the corporate ladder. There's all these different things, but let's not fool an entire community, or at least let that be known that that's the case, because it's just not true. I think that the biggest thing is, what stories are we telling and evangelizing as to society as a whole? You can find plenty of narratives around going to college and graduating from college and getting a degree and getting a job. It's like, there's that. Where's the story about? That's why I gotta get in touch with Mike Rowe, because he's big on the trades, right? Oh, yeah. It's like, how do you evangelize that?
Yeah,
as an option as well.
Well, he's doing a pretty good job of evangelizing that, and I think there is slowly but surely a cultural shift. Dr. Johnson's point was because I visit a lot of schools in my district, and my district is northern suburbs of Houston, western suburbs of Houston, and a pretty strong CT program, pretty impressive programs I've seen where it's real hard skills actually being taught and encouraged at the high school level, which is really where you need to start. But what he pointed out is that if you go to inner city Houston, that's not the case. The programs just aren't as strong, or they exist, but parents are not choosing them. And that's it's hard to explain that.
Which one is it? Do they exist? They're not being chosen?
Yeah.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, if you had funding for a program and you were in, oh my goodness, we can talk about the way the school. If you want to identify a system that disadvantages specific groups of people, let's talk about the school system. But in that case, which one's true? It's a very important distinction.
It is important. I think I remember asking him that, and yet they do have access. They do have access. So for some reason, they're not as popular. I don't know. I mean, maybe there could be better ones. I'd have to dive down into that issue a little bit more. But you're right. That is an important question, and they offer different solutions. One solution would be, well, we need to make sure that the programs exist first of all, and if they do exist but nobody's choosing to do them, then we need to change our marketing strategy for them. Guidance counselors need to be encouraging this more. Teachers need to be taught about how important this is. They need to have John come and speak to students. Sure. Which would be great. Do you ever get to do that? Have you ever looked into that? Just speaking to students about these kind of issues?
I have on occasion, but I need to do a lot more of that. Yeah. Typically, I'll go speak to companies and that type of thing, or sales organizations, connection between mindset and performance. But you're right. It's important to talk about those things, and I think that's what can be done in part, is to not to only talk about them, but whenever the lazy or dangerous argument is there, we're gonna have to get more folks to get up there and combat that. And it's super uncomfortable to do it, and it's one of those things that, who wants that? Who wants to go do that? Right? It's like, all right. I gotta throw my hat in the ring, because if you don't, then you're going to sit by and watch this thing disintegrate.
Yeah.
And so it's time to have those conversations. And so, that's really what's most important.
Well, we appreciate you doing it, and fascinating discussion. Love it. Encourage everybody to watch The Dark Dollar when it comes out. Is it out? Not out?
It's on its way out. Just go to if you go to if you go to my website, you can actually sign up to be notified exactly when and where you can watch it.
Okay.
So
cool. What's your website?
It's johnguydon.com, and that's JOHNGUYDON.com.
GUYDON. Guydon. Guy Don.
Exactly.
Got it. All right. Great. John, thanks for being on.
Thanks
Great
for having
discussion. Good meeting you on the plane. Glad we did that. All right, we're out.